Well, I think that over the years, there were probably, I think you say 10 quantum leaps in training and ability, which has led the team to its superb level of performance today. And I think the first quantum leap was probably the issue of good clothing. Ladders and heavy blocks and tackles and hawser-laid ropes were changed for mountaineering ropes, lightweight ropes. Bare-paw snowshoes were eliminated and instead the team started using mountaineering snowshoes so that they could go uphill and actually kick steps with the snowshoes. That was a very important change in equipment.
Searches frequently occur, through somebody's been out all day, it's getting into the evening, they haven't returned home. Family calls the RCMP to find out if they're where they are. Cars located in a parking lot on top of the mountain. And then we would get called in, often as late as 11 o'clock at night. It's getting dark, you've been up all day already at work, whatever. And now you have to go out and start looking for somebody. Didn't matter what the weather was, didn't matter that it was nighttime. We were all trained to be out there for those kind of conditions.
We had this old food truck and some basket stretches, and then eventually we got nylon ropes and carabiners and all the modern necessary equipment you use in order to extract somebody on a cliff or so. It's not bad when they're at the bottom, but that was the main thing. And then we got the hypothermia kit where we experienced that there was casualties who were out for a long time, and they always ended up in hypothermia. We had no radios, no real equipment, and nothing. We made up on top of, if it was on Seymour, we made up there, and I assigned 3-4 guys in a team out certain trails which we knew existed and what have you. So sometimes the missing person was found within a half an hour, and the poor guys who had assignments further out on a mountain, they probably searched all night, and everybody was already in bed.
Yeah, my dad was Tim Jones, long-time team leader of North Shore Rescue, and growing up, kind of the times that we got to see him, he would often drag us down to what was the old rescue base, which was like an old small brick coat trailer filled with ropes and old frame backpacks and various other tools of the trade. One of those early memories was we went down to a storage unit where a guy had a bunch of old surplus military supplies, and I remember my dad sending me in there to crawl over the stuff to find useful items that could be used in the rescue team. And so one of the things I found was a loudhailer, and that was a big find, and it went in the command vehicle.
I learned early that the sooner the call goes in to North Shore Search and Rescue, the sooner we can share the information and work together in commencing the search if one is required, or simply providing them a heads up as to what exactly we are dealing with. Daylight in a lot of circumstances is dwindling, and the timeliness of a phone call, say from the watch commander with the RCMP to the North Shore Search and Rescue manager, allows that search to be commenced and ideally complete before darkness falls.
We used to sort of tell people it might take 45 minutes or an hour from the time we first learned about it till the whole team was out there. Nowadays, that's done with cell phones and texting. We are called directly by the group, and whoever calls us, which would be RCMP or fire and ambulance. And so the search managers know immediately. We all join the call, and so we can hear from the person reporting it, all the details. We can make sure that we have as many details as possible. Then we can stay on the line, sort out the division of labor about who's going to do what, page out the team. And so we can have basically all of our squads out, all the teams out, usually within 20 minutes to half an hour. And at the same time as getting helicopters going if that's required, and it just works really well.
The team started to acquire personnel with a deeper ability in medical response, particularly trauma response. Paramedics, for instance. When we were learning how to operate on snow, it very quickly became apparent that we had to learn all about treating hypothermia, because many of the victims buried in an avalanche or lost overnight developed hypothermia, so you had to know how to treat it. Otherwise, you could kill the victim after you'd found him, so to speak.
That took us to cooperating with University of Victoria. They had a manning cold water experiment going on where they were trying to figure out how to treat people who fell off fishing boats, etc., and tugboats, and fell in the water and then would die of hypothermia. And they were trying to address that situation. And I got in touch with the Professor John Haywood there and said, look, we're a mountain rescue group and we're looking for help in treating hypothermia in the backcountry. Different to what they were doing at the moment. They were immersing postgrad students in water and studying the effects on them, but in the end it's the same thing. So they helped us by producing several pieces of equipment that helped us in the treatment of hypothermia. Previously it was just a matter of trying to warm somebody somehow and not having any particular equipment. So they developed a couple of pieces of equipment which were very useful. One was called a hydraulic sarong, which was basically a garment that velcroed around the torso, and it had plastic tubing in it that went back and forth through the garment, and we would pump hot water or warm water through that from a little stove and a pot, and the hot water went around the patient, around the torso, and back into the pot again, and gradually you could warm them up with that. And that was quite reasonably portable, because you would have a stove and a pan and this roll-up garment, so we could use that. They then came up with a more sophisticated piece of equipment, a canister which had its built-in heater, which would produce hot water and steam, and we would put a mask on the patient's face, on the person's face, and have them breathe in warmed, humidified air, or you could entrain oxygen, and that way you could warm up the core first. You got the warm, humidified air down into the lungs, and that helped because you could warm from the core outwards, which is the hallmark of treating hypothermia properly.
When I joined the team, we had a few climbing ropes, very little else in the way of equipment. We had one vehicle, which was a converted bread delivery van, and team members provided their own gear. Well, they still do today, but there was certainly no specialized equipment. And so we relied on more or less brute strength to find somebody and bring them back. It has changed. I would never have envisioned a fleet of vehicles like this or the range of equipment.
We started to introduce modern mountain rescue use of ropes, rope techniques. for safety while you're traveling, being roped up, etc., for ascent and descent. And we introduced mountain rescue style body retrieval systems involving mechanical advantage. So instead of heaving on one single rope to pull somebody up a cliff, we might have a pulley which would knock the load down to 50%, etc., etc. And various devices like that, and ways of rigging up a rope which made it easier to retrieve a body. And instead of great big huge heavy blocks and tackles, we had lightweight versions.
Now this evolution of capability has always been the strength of the team. When the ability for using radios in a more effective way came up, we had team members step forward and companies who mastered the idea of repeaters, so we had a safe operational status for team members at all times. Originally, if we went out to Seymour and we had a major search on the west side, we would say 4 or 5, 6 hours later, I wonder how so-and-so is doing. We haven't heard from them. That made the strategic decision come forward. We must have 100% radio comms at all times. If you didn't have it, you'd rejig the program to make sure you had it.
Personally, I got sent out on a search assignment one time in really poor snow, icy conditions, ice crystals beating on your face all night. And we were out for about 3 hours without a radio. And when we returned to the parking lot, there was one person sitting in his car waiting for us. And they had found the person about 15 minutes after we departed. But we didn't know that because we didn't have a radio. So it was a bit of a turning point for me, because it was at that moment I decided somebody has to do something about this, and I guess it's going to be me. So I started looking into how to acquire more radio equipment for the team, because not only is it more efficient to run a search with good communications, but it's a lot safer for everybody involved. I had to visit a lot of radio shops. There weren't too many in the city at the time. One radio shop, I remember, Phoenix Communications, they're extremely helpful. And they would give us some older equipment that we could, basically rebuild and turn into usable radios. If we had to buy a new handheld radio in those days, radios cost in the neighborhood of $2,500. And that's back in the 70s, so that's a lot of money. So we couldn't really afford to do that. The team just didn't have that kind of resources. So we had to acquire older equipment and try to keep it working, try to get batteries for it and so on. And it was a bit tricky because we could have 3 or 4 different brands of radios all needing different batteries. And if you were running out of battery and you tried to meet up with another team to get their spare battery, often they would have a different radio and the batteries wouldn't match. So that kind of drove us into going in one direction with one technology, one manufacturer. So you learn as you go. But a lot of it was scrounged, a lot of it we built, and it got us there eventually. There wasn't anyone else on the team for a long time that had any technical capability in the radio side. Even for me, not being an expert in radio communications at that time, you had to learn a lot. Did a lot of research, looked into a lot of materials, worked closely with the radio shops who gave us a lot of advice and support. And it was a good-sized learning curve to get the technology into place for that.
Which took a few years to put in place, but the team developed a state-of-the-art communication system, both in the base, where it was at the time, next to the fire hall, and in the mobile units. So all of a sudden you've got pretty good communication with the teams in the field in areas where the radio would reach. And then subsequently that was improved further by putting repeater stations in all over the North Shore. So radio communication was a quantum leap. So another quantum leap was using float tubes for white water searching the 3 rivers. and that allowed a direct search down in the water rather than having to search from the bank where quite often you couldn't see in certain areas. That was actually followed up by development of a scuba diving team, essentially to assist the RCMP in search and recovery. And we were the first underwater search and rescue group under the NAUI name in North America to complete a search and rescue course. Now, it didn't last very long because of bureaucracy, and one of the problems was that some of the searches didn't actually involve a person, like they might be for, say, a murder weapon or a set of torpedoes in Howe Sound. So the RCMP eventually developed their own scuba team.
Funding to search and rescue has historically been a challenge. It is only in recent years that we've seen funding being more stable, getting funding from government being more common. In those days, when I started, the budget was in the order of $20,000 a year for a 40-man team. Today, the comparison for the same size team is closer to $1 million. So there's a lot of changes. How easy was it to stay in budget? That depended a lot on the leadership. The team captain, as one would expect, when I say the team captain, the team leader had and continues to have a significant influence on how the team is trained, is prepared for their job, and so on. One of the people who was probably the most challenging to deal with over time was when Tim Jones was the team leader. He had a great ability to spend money and believe in the future, and my job was right behind him collecting the money that he was spending. So there was some challenges, and I can look back now and I can say with a smile that we worked as a team. One of the major changes to funding search and rescue teams came with the development of I guess what I would call allowances that are paid to teams now by the provincial emergency management organization for the use of team equipment. And one of the key people that brought that concept forward was Dave Brewer, and got the province to recognize that the teams are using their own community-sourced funding and personal funds to provide the equipment they need, and it only made sense then, if we were using it, that we ought to be financed in part for that use. Telephones are a very interesting technology that changed search and rescue. You can now ping most of the smartphones and within a 5-meter radius know exactly where the person is situated, and we just simply walk in and pick them up and bring them out. So that's changed things. It's instead of doing multi-day searches, where most of our searches are over in a very short period of time, and I'm talking minutes and maybe hours as opposed to days, in some cases weeks.
At the 3 local mountains, so the Grouse, Seymour, and Cypress, we have search bases there now that we never used to have. So that's actually a building complete. All the equipment is there, radios are there, so we don't need to bring the trucks up. Just as a search manager, I drive up, open up the building, turn on the lights, and we have a fully set up search base ready to go. Some teams would be tasked to go up to the mountain, say up to Seymour in this case, and other groups may say go to our helicopter base at Bone Creek, because we know we're going to fly a certain group in. So we got front country with people coming in from the base of Seymour. We can cover back country because we can fly people in by helicopter, and then they can kind of come together if their person is somewhere in between.
When there's a lot of snow, you're always dealing with the possibility of avalanches. So the team had to learn how to assess avalanche danger, both on foot, by testing the stability on foot, but also by digging a pit in the snow and looking at the layers and looking at the crystal structure. So they had to learn how to assess the hazard involved in, say, crossing this slope or going along this ridge, because you don't want to lose your own team members if you're trying to find and rescue somebody else.
Usually if one of our customers has gone missing or their friends haven't shown up at a chairlift on time or met at the car or come home for dinner, we get the call, and then we'll initiate the search by going around all our boundaries and looking for a set of tracks. And it looks like they've gone way down past our sort of scope of where we work, then we call North Shore Rescue. And some of my main supervisors have been working with me for 20 years, so we kind of know a lot of the gullies, and we know all the places where people start to get in trouble. And that's Tim Jones sort of realized that maybe instead of sending his guys sort of out and spreading them out everywhere, if they got the information from us, we knew all the gullies. There's only a certain number of gullies that people go into that will lead them astray.
Well, my dog Chloe, she's trained in both wilderness search and rescue and avalanche search and rescue. So the wilderness search and rescue is what they call air scenting. So we, although Chloe does track recreationally, I don't use it for search and rescue. It's air scenting that we do. And so she'll go into an area and she'll look for human scent or articles with human scent. So she's trained in wilderness search and rescue and avalanche search and rescue. So with the air scenting, we started off training her to find both people and articles with human scent on it, and so she'll go out and find an article, return that to me. The nice thing is that those articles are clues, and can we attribute this article to the subject we're looking for, or is it somebody else's? And then she'll scent, as long as she's in the scent cone, she can scent the human from a fair distance. So if the human's unresponsive, that's where a dog is really valuable. If the human is responsive, probably a search team that's yelling out will locate them before the dog will, but if they're unresponsive or unable to respond, that's where the dog is very useful.
A lot of teams throughout the province think we're kind of the glory team, the media hounds, if you will. But we're like any other team. We're just in very close proximity to downtown Vancouver. We have a wealth of media here. But we're constantly progressing, and I think, if you kind of look back in history, the programs that started for search and rescue, such as the Class D operations, I mean, North Shore is one of the busiest and first teams that started doing Class D operations, which is human external cargo. We have a FLIR now that we can adapt to any one of the Talon Helicopters machines that's owned by our team. We have a heli-mounted Reco detector, which is basically a search and rescue detector that picks up on reflectors in apparel. We've also just purchased night vision goggles in partnership with Talon Helicopters, and the hope is that we'll be able to do a pilot program through the province to be the first team to operate with night vision capabilities. We're looking into developing a hoist program in the coming years. So there's a lot of things that are on the go that are, we're kind of setting the path for them for other teams. Looking forward now, we've developed an avalanche forecaster group. We have an advanced medical group that's made up of 9 physicians and 1 ER nurse. We're building new search and rescue stations, like permanent facilities, which is a huge step forward for us.